Right, I think we're live. Namaste, everyone. Welcome to another edition of the Bharatvaarta Weekly. Thank you so much for joining us. I have Abhishek Paul and Nirav Kanodra here with me to discuss the news and views from the week that was. Today, there's plenty to talk about. As the country celebrated Ram Navami, there were some communal clashes, right? Then we had the fantastic exchange between External Affairs Minister Mr. S. Jaishankar and the US Secretary of State Anthony Blinken. Meanwhile, in the state of Karnataka, Minister Ishwarappa had resigned on corruption charges. And in some positive news, Egypt has approved India as a wheat supplier, and India is also receiving a shipment of S-400 missiles from Russia. So there's plenty to talk about. And as usual, let's talk about, before we get into the news, let's talk about the episode we put out last week. This was with Nirav and Rahul Bajoria. And we spoke about how FTAs have moved way past being foreign diplomacy tools to actually being an integral part of our economic policy. And it was very well received. And I think it was fairly comprehensive as well. Abhishek, did you catch this episode?
Yeah, I've been to 50% of it so far. So yeah, I think obviously Rahul and Nirav very well explained, the basis for FTAs, their importance, and the strategic role they will play in foreign affairs and diplomacy, apart from the whole economic aspect, obviously. So yeah, great episode. Need to check it out fully now.
Yeah, definitely check out this episode. It was very, very interesting. Moving on to the first piece of news for the week. Last week, Ram Navami celebrations were marred by violent communal clashes. These clashes took place across Gujarat, Madhya Pradesh, Jharkhand, and West Bengal. Festival processions for the occasion were interrupted by stone pelting, arson, and violence. Violence also broke out in northwest Delhi's Jahangirpuri on Saturday as stones were pelted during a Hanuman Jayanti procession. Police were forced to resort to firing tear gas shells to bring the situation under control in many affected areas. All the areas in these four states have been kept under strict vigil. Nirav, it's pretty unfortunate, right? I don't know. Every time I guess something like this happens, it really calls for introspection.
Yeah. So I think, to be law and order being broken, right? It's not good, whatever community, whatever it is. And I think this needs a little bit of quick action by the police, and needs the judicial system to penalize the culprits. So I think that is what is needed. See, loss of private property or life is not acceptable under any circumstances, and there is no excuse of hurting religious sentiment here or there, right? I think this is what it is. Yes, there are processions. Those are kind of every religious activity, even like Jains and Sikhs, etc., do carry out their processions. I think it is whichever way it is. I think it's a little bit of a police failure, little bit of a law and order failure, and I think leaders from all communities need to come together and condemn this, right? That this kind of thing is not tolerable for whatever reasons. So yeah, it's a very sad thing, but that's all what one can say. I think there are a lot of these vested interests and people who kind of want to sow seeds of communal disharmony. There's always a small percentage who are the actively doing these things. They need to be brought to book. Yeah, that's all what I can say.
Yeah, in my experience as well, I think these are occasions when certain elements of society take advantage, right? To settle scores which have nothing to do with which may have nothing to do with any kind of communities or whatever. Yeah. And it's a law and order problem that happens in various sections of India, right? Some of this may not be reported as widely, but it's pretty unfortunate that it happened in all of these different states, 4-5 different states. The Delhi violence, especially, I think, has escalated. Right. So yeah, let's hope that, law and order and peace returns. So moving on, External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar's comments at the India-US dialogue have gone viral. At a joint press conference, the minister answered a question regarding human rights issues in India. He stated that India also takes up human rights issues with the US. He also alluded to lobbies and vote banks which influence the views of those in power. The US Secretary of State's comments on human rights in India were seen as a rare, direct rebuke of Washington by India. The EAM's sharp response also came after two Sikh men were assaulted last week in an alleged hate crime incident in New York. Abhishek, this was fun to watch, right? I mean, very sharp exchange between Mr. Blinken and Mr. Jaishank.
Yeah, so I think last week on the trip, we had basically the 2+2 dialogue, where the defense and foreign ministers or secretaries of both nations had a dialogue followed by, I think, an hour-long press briefing. And the next day, I think Jaishankar and Blinken went to address at the Harvard University, not Harvard, but Harvard. So I think this remark that you're referring to happened in that forum, right? Where so interestingly, before we come to that, I think just wanted to point out that the 2+2 meeting and briefing was also very interesting. And like, I don't know if others share the assessment, but to me, I think at least Anthony Blinken has been probably one of the most reasonable sounding guys among the US establishment when it comes to India. So one of the remarks that caught my attention was that, obviously the reporters and journalists kept asking about Russia, Ukraine, and why India is not condemning, etc., right? They kept probing that question throughout. And one of the remarks that Anthony Blinken made was that, there was a time for a very long time that India and Russia's relationships grew because US was not in a position to become a partner for India. So he sort of was very frank in terms of the historical context of the India-Russia relation. He did not sort of dismiss it that India is doing something totally wrong, right? And then he said that, but now we are in a position to be, good partners. And so I thought that was a pretty interesting and good remark from his side. But yeah, coming to this particular comment, obviously, some of the key topics that are picked up by journalists or intellectuals who speak or debate on these issues these days when it comes to India, US, is obviously India's relationship with Russia. And then there are so many of these reports and think tanks who have come up with publications talking about the declining democracy quotient in India. And obviously, human rights is one of those parameters, right, which fall into that aspect, right? And so it's only natural that, they will keep bringing these topics up. I think Jaishankar's remarks were obviously designed to sort of give a befitting reply to those questions, saying that, it's not like it's a one-way, it's going to be only a one-way street. And India too India too has concerns about, happenings that are going on in the Western hemisphere, or let's say US in particular. And that is true, right? Like, Indians do continue to face, they are often victims of violence or hate crime in the West as well, right? So that was like a fair remark, but I think it's also true that, the in the larger context right now, given how the media narrative is going, this will continue to be asked constantly. But the good thing, I think, is that in general, the Biden administration especially through Anthony Blinken, has not gone to such a level that a lot of folks had feared would happen under a democratic administration, and made this a constant talking point day in, day out, right? So that has not happened. And so I think, at least when it comes to this presidential term, India-US relationship will probably not deteriorate when it comes to this question. The future, of course, we don't know, right? Under future presidents and administrations.
Yeah, but this also seems like a standard template that's often used, right, to kind of chide India, right?
Yes.
And I'm really glad that we kind of gave back, in
Yeah.
full this time.
No,
Yeah.
yeah. So this one I agree. So one is, what has Jaishankar done is he's ended the conversation. By earlier, what would happen is that India would always get some like be chided or scolded, and kind of you're already on the back foot. And when you're having your 2+2 other negotiations, right, you're already on a back foot. What Jaishankar has done smartly is he ended the conversation saying that if you have concerns about us, we have concerns about you, but kind of let's move on and let's look at common ground, right?
So one thing I would say, and I was listening to the full press conference today, the 2+2 meeting. So the other three people there, right? So Blinken, Austin, and Rajnath Singh from our side, their remarks are often in a very standard, typical politicians, very diplomatic answers. But Jaishankar certainly gives a very, very different tone and tenor in his answer. He's often
Absolutely.
quite unorthodox in the way he replies, and he confronts questions in a very different way, which I think is like, it's like an asset right now, right? We don't often have people who are able to, cut to the core, removing all the niceties along the way, right? So it's always good to listen to.
And maybe you can accuse him of like overplaying your hand, but what he has done is in these negotiations, he is talking as an equal rather than as a junior partner, right? Agreed, like in economic heft or in military ties. So India may not be equal, and it isn't, right? But still, you are coming to the table as an equal, and this is a refreshing change in attitude. So that is definitely there. Always there's a risk of sometimes overplaying your hand, but I'm guessing Jaishankar knows enough about diplomacy than all of us ever would, right? So absolutely, it's a refreshing change to see.
Yeah, I mean, he's almost never rude or impolite, right? I mean, he's answering in a very tactful way, in fact, right? And in a way that helps someone pause and reflect, really, right? And so yeah, I mean, it's a very refreshing sort of a diplomacy, on that perspective. Well, moving on. In the midst of the war in Ukraine, India has received a shipment of S-400 missile systems from Russia. According to sources, the consignment of S-400 missile system was delivered by ship and is now operational. Parts of the missile system arrived via both air and sea routes and were quickly deployed in the designated locations. The equipment, including simulators, study materials, and documents, have arrived for the S-400 training squadron, which will be set up soon to train Indian Air Force personnel. Nirav, this is positive news, right?
Yeah. So see, these shipments which have come now, the orders were placed long ago, right? So that is one thing. And India needs to kind of look at what is best for India. So obviously, India has like a critical dependency on Russia. And when somebody is your biggest arms supplier, you cannot really go against them publicly, right? So this is one thing. India needs a balancing force. India has to like say to the West that this is what is Russia offering me, and historical ties that we have with them. If you want us not to accept these things, you need to give us something else in return, right? So obviously, I think, see, India has done a reasonably good job of balancing all the powers. India is allied with Russia on certain things. India is opportunistically buying Russian crude, though very tiny amounts. It's very, very tiny amounts at like a very big discount. India probably is paying for all of these in rupees, which Russia will either reinvest in India or they will have to buy some Indian goods. So that's another positive thing. And India continues to be part of the Quad with US, Japan, and Australia. And India does have military ties even with France, where India buys Rafale jets and a lot of other military equipment, or Israel or the US, right? So that is there. But also this calls for a case of indigenization of Indian weapons. So obviously it is a process. You can't do it overnight. So that's what it is. I think without making too much of a hue and cry, India has to accept these missiles, put them and use them wherever these are like anti-aircraft missiles. So use them wherever we think that there could be danger of air invasion or aircraft flying over, right? So that's all what there is. And yeah, it's a good thing that India has to play like a balancing role over here and care about its own interests.
So I just would add that in the same press conference that I was talking about, right? So this S-400 issue was also brought up by certain journalists, right? And so they asked the US folks, in terms of, so what are you going to do regarding CATSA, right? So in there, I think Secretary Austin replied that no decision has been taken, etc. While Jaishankar, I think, not sure if on that forum or another forum, he was asked about those sanctions. So he also gave again a very good reply. He said that, that CATSA is the US domestic law. So it's for the US to decide what they want to do. And S-400 is for our, defense needs. And we are doing what is needed for our defense. So he was quite emphatic in replying on that.
Yeah, if anything, this makes all the more the case that why we have to be allied with Russia and not take sides, right? So yeah. Well, in some domestic news, Karnataka Minister Mr. Ishwarappa has been booked in an abetment of suicide case, resulting in his resignation. Contractor and BJP worker Santosh Patil was found dead in a lodge in Udupi. In a note, Mr. Patil blamed Ishwarappa and his aides for forcing him to take the extreme step. Reportedly, the minister and his aides demanded 40% commission to clear bills for a pending project. Police then booked the Karnataka Rural Development and Panchayat Raj Minister, Mr. Ishwarappa, for allegedly abetting the suicide. In a one-line resignation letter submitted to Chief Minister Mr. Basuraj Bommai, Mr. Ishwarappa said he is resigning to court voluntarily. Well, I don't know the specifics of the case as such, and obviously a lot of it is yet to be investigated. But this kind of routinely happens where ministers pressure contractors, right? I mean, it's almost like an open secret in society, right? I mean, we blame the roads and we blame all of the infrastructure and all of that stuff for, people kind of, for these contractors being really, corrupt and whatnot. But really, I mean, there's no incentive for those folks to, screw their own margins and like do great work at for our benefit, right? And usually those margins are skimmed off by the likes of ministers and plenty of the hierarchy in between, basically. So yeah, I mean, it's pretty unfortunate, pretty tragic. Abhishek, what do you think?
Yeah, so this particular case is very unfortunate, I think, and what is more unfortunate is that this case came into notice about a month back when newspapers carried the story that this particular contractor had actually sent letters to the union minister Giriraj Singh with whatever his allegations were, right? And right at that moment, I mean, looking back, probably in hindsight, we could say that police should have probably jumped in quicker and done the investigation faster, right? Either way. But yeah, as you said, contractors and politicians obviously form a very old and dubious nexus, right, in all parts of our country. So yeah, I mean, it's just it's also sort of not a good look on the Karnataka BJP government. I mean, It took him some time for Mr. Ishwarappa to give his resignation. But yeah, I guess the police investigation should quickly, get to the details of the case and, find out what's the truth behind this.
Yeah. And also, I think post Mr. Yadurappa, the BJP state government outfit, at least, right, has been in a little bit of a,
Yeah,
in a
I
flux, I would
mean,
say.
when you have such a big leader who's leading the party in the
Yeah.
state for such a long time, obviously a vacuum will happen, right? And I guess the new chief minister is yet to fully establish his authority, to the rank and file of the party yet. So that's also a factor right now.
All right, moving on. Germany may snub India as G7 guest over our stance on the Russo-Ukrainian conflict. Reportedly, Germany is debating whether to invite Prime Minister Narendra Modi to the Group of Seven summit it's hosting in June. G7 nations have taken the lead in pursuing sanctions against Russia, and some have sent weapons to Ukraine. They have also sought to engage other countries to condemn President Vladimir Putin and to put limits on trade and investment with Russia. Well, Nirav, should we really care about this?
Yeah. So one thing like I would like to say. So one is India is part of G20, but not a part of the G7. This time they are calling guests. Each G7 summit, they do call certain countries as guests, and India typically has been invited to like a lot of these ones. You see that the other guests that they are inviting, right? It is countries in Africa like Botswana, right? And they're not inviting India. So I think this is kind of like their loss. They've taken it a bit too seriously about like India's abstention in the UN General Assembly. But there are 50 countries who've done that. Second, India needs to call out hypocrisy of Germany, where actually Ukraine and Poland are also criticizing Germany for continuing to buy Russian gas. So they've stopped buying Russian crude oil, but they're still buying Russian gas. There are other European nations still buying Russian oil as well, right? Italy was trying to say that, oh, please don't sanction Gucci and Prada selling the luxury goods in Russia, right? So they are being, you probably call it hypocritical about it. So I think it is fine. If India is snubbed, so be it. I think with S. Jaishankar being very communicative about these double standards, India needs to have its own interests. I think we at Bharatvaarta have also been saying this for a while, that if India is snubbed, it is snubbed. There's no big deal. We are part of the G20. And usually the guests have limited role in the dialogues anyways. So it's not as if it really matters a lot. And so the G7 summit is in after June. There's another one in like Indonesia, where probably India will be invited as a guest. So I think it's just it's probably not even worth thinking too much about. And if anything, if India is criticized publicly, it gives us a chance to highlight their own hypocrisy. Or to be fair, if India can use this as leverage to say that this is what I'm getting from Russia, what can you offer me in return if you want me to behave in such a way, and make the most of the opportunity. That's what it is.
Yeah. In some positive news, in a big breakthrough, Egypt has approved India as one of its suppliers for wheat. According to a statement from Commerce Minister Piyush Goyal, Egypt is likely to lift about 1 million tons of wheat from India, of which 240,000 tons will be shipped in April itself. The country is one of the biggest importers of Russian and Ukrainian wheat. It buys 11 to 12 million tons of wheat from Russia, Ukraine, and other countries in a year. This might change in the future as India is hoping to achieve a wheat export target of at least 10 million tons in 2023, which can even go up to 15 million tons if conditions remain favorable. Nirav, this is really positive news, right? I mean, we did speak about exports and agriculture exports in particular.
Yeah. So I think you all have had episodes about farm laws, etc. as well. But so I want to point out some numbers. So India roughly annually produces 100 metric tons, 100 million tons of wheat, right? So India produces about 100. FCI stocks have about 24 million tons in our godowns, right? So that is one which is the spare buffer stock. Through the pandemic, though we had like complete sowing and our agriculture wasn't affected, India had enough wheat and rice to give it even free. Instead of 2 rupees a kilo, was given at like free to people, right, who held the below poverty line ration cards, etc., right? So one is India is a surplus food country. Two is, earlier, since like we've had this whole period of green revolution, etc., we looked at like food exports were like a crime because, oh, India was a hungry country. That's no longer the case. So we are producing more than we consume, and sometimes maybe we are producing too much of certain things, right? But this has given us an opportunity. Three is, Egypt imports about 11-12 million tons. There are other big importers as well, like Indonesia, Vietnam, etc. And India has been earlier exporting only about 1 to 2 million tons of wheat, mostly to UAE, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh. I think the countries around us. So this is a very big opportunity. We already have stocks. So it's not as if earlier the socialist politicians would say that how can India export food when people are hungry? So I think that's no longer the case. We have excess food stocks, and this needs to be well publicized even for geopolitics and diplomacy, that India is being like the exporter of food and saving the other countries from like higher prices or hunger. Because India has been chastised, like as Germany snubbing India at G7, or like India has been criticized for abstaining to vote against Russia. This needs to be highlighted, that what positive thing is India doing to rest of the world. And earlier, our minimum support prices were higher than the international prices of wheat and rice. But now what has happened is, due to suddenly Ukraine and Russia being pulled out of the international market, the global wheat prices have gone up, so that now they're above the minimum support price. So now farmers, instead of having to sell only at the mandi, only to FCI, they actually would have been better off having an optionality to export directly. Anyways, that's unfortunately not happening, but this allows FCI to export because they are holding a lot of stock, some of it which even rots. So this allows them to export the stock and generate, I think export revenue, whatever it is still minimal, right? It is 3,500 rupees per quintal. So, or something is a global price, multiply by whatever 10 million tons. It's not going to change our trade balance by a huge amount. But what this actually does is changes the perception of India. And I think as much as NY Times, etc., are bashing India for other things, India needs to leverage this amount. And India needs to gain allies like Egypt, like other food importing countries, to align more with India on terms of geopolitics over here. So I think that's an opportunity. So, and which is being played out quite well. So it's a heartening development.
Yeah, no, the actual numbers itself might be like pretty small, as you said, at this point of time, but then it opens the doors. It's a new opportunity. And it may grow into something more significant, obviously, right? So, all right. And this is my favorite piece of news from the week that was. Elon Musk has made a bid to gain private. The billionaire offered $54.20 per share in cash, bringing up Twitter's valuation to about $43 billion, $6 billion more than its current valuation. In a TED talk, Musk spoke about his goals for the platform, expressing a belief that Twitter should be, to quote, Twitter should, to quote, the open source the algorithm. He also described how he thinks Twitter's long-awaited edit button should work. Well, I know all of us have plenty of stuff to say about this, but yeah, I mean, let me just say that, you know, one of the world's richest man is like a shit poster, right? I mean, he's an epic troll, and it's just such a fantastic time to live in. Seriously, I mean, super entertaining guy, and I think after Donald Trump had been banned from Twitter, there was a vacuum, of course, and seems like Elon Musk is kind of filling that vacuum, right? People kind of think of Elon as a mad genius, but I think they should also understand he's a very calculative businessman as well, right? If you look at the Tesla stories, for example, and how he's doing some of the other stuff as well, So I don't know. I mean, is he serious? He may be serious, but he will definitely have a plan B and a plan C. And Musk doesn't do anything without any reason, right? I mean, for entirely selfless reasons as such, right? And he shouldn't. I mean, I'm not faulting him for that. I mean, everyone should think in their self-interest, of course. This whole I don't know, what do you call it? This whole free speech platform that Twitter will turn into a public square and that everyone will be able to say everything, unhindered. I think that's a fallacy. I don't think there's ever a platform like that, right? Even in the real world, there are consequences to speech, right? Which, of course, I mean, we have discussed some of that on this episode itself, right? So yeah, I mean, anytime I hear some of this idealism, right? I mean, I'm tempted to kind of believe in some of that idealism and not really snub it with some cynicism, because I want the world to be that way, right? I mean, and who knows? I mean, people who are crazy enough to think that way usually change the world for the better. So yeah, what do you guys think? Nirav?
Yeah.
Abhishek?
So, okay, I would say a few things, right? So one is, you saw that Elon Musk now owns 9% of Twitter in his personal capacity. It's not as if Tesla has taken over. And the triggering reactions which came out from certain set of people. So I think like Twitter, it's a fantastic medium. That's how we've connected, right? We've never met in person, but it has been selectively censoring stuff, right? So and then they are saying that they call themselves guardian of free speech, but if they are selectively censoring and they say, oh, free speech would lead to chaos. So I think that's a little bit of a negative. You can find out like tweets which can say that, oh, the 2000 elections were rigged, but you can't find that, say, about 2020, right? And so those kind of things are there. Obviously, it has in the US, it has one set of a political bias. Also for India, right? So that is one issue. And you saw like some people scampering around. There is talk of Twitter having like a poison pill where they want to like kind of either destroy the company, or they're looking for like, as in M&A, they call a white knight, someone else to take over instead of like Elon Musk. So here there could be multiple reasons. One is Elon Musk is a master, like a genius. It doesn't look like in the episode like the world's richest man with net worth of 266 billion trying to acquire a media platform for 54 billion valuation, right? With which, if he could censor it his way, kind of like promotes his things. So no one talks about it. He's actually been shown in like a light of like trying to open up for free speech, and all these other guys are looking as like the what you might say is the villains or in the saga. So that is one thing. Two is, for Musk, this is like a big speculative trade that if things go right, he acquires it. Maybe if he can run the platform in a better way, its valuation is much smaller versus all the fangs. He can probably grow Twitter, and it's a great business opportunity if he has it. But say, for example, if it doesn't work out, and if, say, Parag Agarwal and the board manage to find another suitor who kind of tries to acquire it, he can just sell off his 9% and walk away. So I think he's taken a calculated gamble over here, and being like the shit poster that he is, he's kind of loaded the dice in his favor. That's what first impressions, or that's what I feel out here, that it's a heads I win, tails you lose kind of a scenario. And he's played his cards quite well. So yeah, that's about it. As in terms of whether it is successful, whether there's any real change or not, no idea. Twitter still remains like a great medium. I always tell like other friends that other social media networks are connecting with people you already know. Say, for example, Facebook. And Twitter is a platform where you meet new people who share the same interests as you, right? And that has helped me or enabled me meet a lot of like-minded people. So it's a fantastic platform. Can it be improved? Obviously. And let's see what happens.
Yeah, I think, the potential for growth in Twitter, right? I mean, given the engagement it has and given how relevant it is to the times, and it has been, right? Considering all of those things, I think, I mean, Twitter has been very, very, I mean, I don't want to say underperformed, but I mean, has not lived up to that potential, right? Seriously, because uh, really, I mean, I think there's just so much one can do, right? I mean, each of us have an entire running list of things that we would add to Twitter product, right? If we were made head of product for a day or something. Even on the business front, I mean, I had written this article about 6 years ago in Swarajya that, there is probably multiple products within Twitter itself that they can hive off and start monetizing as a SaaS platform by itself, whether it's the data or whatever else, right? So yeah, I mean, this could be a positive for sure, right? I mean, either way, it could be a positive, I think, right? There was the amazing thing is, I mean, the number of memes that have come up, right? I mean, because of this whole thing. So yeah. All right, so that's a wrap from us here on the Bharatvaarta Weekly today. Thank you again for joining us, and we have plenty of episodes coming up. So look forward to seeing you guys on another episode. Thank you.